machine could probably have been built in Babbage's time, and it probably would have worked. How do we prove that? Well, they said, we've got the beautiful fragment, let's see what it's made out of. It turns out to be out of cast iron, mild steel, and bronze. The workmanship that Clement was achieving on the carving of the number wheels was 1.5 thousandths of an inch. This is in the 1830s. Okay. They go to the people who make these gears and they say, can you carve these gears at 1.5 thousandths of an inch tolerance? And they said, oh, we can make them fit like a glove. And the guy said, no, that's not what we want. We want 1.5 thousandths of an inch. And the company says, okay, we can dumb down our machines and make them produce sloppy parts if that's what you want. That's exactly what we want. So they get all this together and they build another 3-column version of the difference engine using difference engine number 2 design, and it works perfectly. So now they start getting the funding to actually build the engine. And they go through this process starting in 1985-86. By 1991, they're almost completely done with the engine. It's early 1991. And someone points out that December 26th is the 200th anniversary of Charles Babbage's birth. Wouldn't it be cool if we could get the machine done by then and present it to the London public? Well, they do. They managed to accomplish that. And the British public goes crazy. Babbage's engine has actually come to life. But it doesn't have the typesetting machine. It's just this part, what we call the printer. A couple of years go by, they're cranking the machine, they're reading the numbers off the result column. Bill Gates walks through the doors. Lawrence Wade thinks to himself, Gates has money, I need a printer. Puts them all together, walks up to Bill and says, would you be willing to fund our typesetting machine, our printer? Bill says, no, I'm not interested. But I know somebody who might be. My retired Chief Technical Officer, Nathan Mirable. So they call him on the phone and they say, Nathan, your boss has suggested you might be interested in building a typesetting machine for our difference engine. So I'd have to see it. So they invite him and his wife to come over and actually see the engine. And they're observed walking around the machine whispering to each other, and they overhear her say to him, not in my house. Now, at the time, we didn't quite understand the question, but later on, we did. What she was talking about was the smell of the oil that's used to lubricate the machine. It was industrial strength oil that had a terrible smell. You don't notice any odor here because what we use is the oil that's used in vegetable processing plants. It has no odor at all. Now, why do we have to make that concession? Because Nathan turns around to Lawrence Wade and says, I want one. And he says, Lawrence says, well, that's great, sir, but what we really need is the printer. Would you be willing to fund the printer? So he thinks about it for a few moments. He says, okay, I'll tell you what, I'll fund your printer, but I want you to start building a clone of the engine itself at the same time. When you're done with the first printer, make a second printer. And when you're done with the entire thing, the clone, that's mine, and I will pay for all of it. Now that was a deal they couldn't pass on. So they started working on it, and by 2003 they finished the first typesetter. By end of 2007 they finished the second. They called Nathan on the phone. He lives up in the Seattle, Tacoma area. This is a picture of him, by the way. Interesting character. This is Nathan Mirable. Now I introduced this guy because to me he's the quintessential Scottish elf. And he's in his 70s. Basically, this is where he belongs, in the laboratory. He's got 4 PhDs. Okay? 2 years ago, he came out with a $600 cookbook. You need a laboratory to do the cooking in many cases. He uses things like liquid nitrogen and stuff like that. So not something you have on your shelf at home. Anyway, interesting character. At this particular point, Nathan is perfectly happy that the engine's ready, but he's not ready to take it. So he says, how much does it weigh? And they said, well, it weighs 5 tons. And they said, well, I was going to put it in my living room next to my Tyrannosaurus Rex, but the marble floors in there probably can't support the weight. So I can't take the thing. I'm going to have you send it to the Computer History Museum in Mountain View, and they can have it for a year. So in April 2008, it was flown into San Francisco, and it came in on a big convoy on dollies and stuff, and it was parked where the cafe is located. It came in this big box. And when we opened up the box, there was a bill of lading inside that says, contents, 1 difference engine. But all the major screws on board had shaken loose. The aircraft's vibration. and it basically had disarrayed itself and would not function. So we had to call upon all the king's men to come back over and help put Humpty Dumpty back together again. And that took them a month, so we didn't actually get started until May. So now we have a 1-year lease from May to May of 2009. So in May 2009, we called him on the phone and said, we're ready to ship it back to you. And he said, I'm not ready yet. So we said, okay, can we keep it until 2012? Oh no, that's way too long. You can keep it to the end of 2009, which is only 8 months, and then call us back, call me back. So we kept it till December. We called him back. He wasn't ready yet. He extended it to the end of 2010. And in 2010, he extended it to the end of 2011. Now think about this. The end of 2011 is until 2012. So we got what we wanted. When we called him back then, he extended it again all the way through 2012. And last December, when we called him, he wasn't ready yet. And he extended it through 2013. Now we're kind of getting tired of this game. Every year having to, we're on it's brinksmanship. Are we going to have it or not? So we'd like to go to a 5-year lease or a 10-year lease, okay? Frankly, we're trying to convince him he doesn't want it. Because he gets more notoriety this way, and you people get a chance to see something that you wouldn't be able to see if it was in his living room. But we don't know how it's going to turn out. But we have it for a while. I haven't described the two ends of the machine that are important. This is what controls it. This is not a programmable computer. In fact, it's not even a calculator. It's an adding machine. And it's all controlled by, it's hardwired. It's steel cams, okay, steel plates. And those cams, there's 2 cams for every function. Now, why did he use 2? Well, he actually has 2 cam arms, one riding on each of those 2 cams. And when one of them gets pushed out, the other one goes foul. And then this cam will push this one back the other way. So it's push, push. Everything is being done with positive push. There's no springs or anything like that in there. Those 28 cams provide 14 functions of horizontal motions, vertical motions, turning motions, everything that drives this machine. Quite sophisticated, 600-pound stack of metal that we have to lubricate. This is the typesetter. This tray down the bottom, you put plaster of Paris in there, and every time the result column is trying to add from the even column to the odd column, there's no odd column there. Instead, there are these rods and so on that actually set up the number that's on these wheels into a stamp that stamps into the plaster of Paris. It also moves the spot wheel around and basically adjusts the numbers on there, so that when this paper comes up, it prints the number on the paper. So you get a hard copy trace of what the numbers are on paper. Now you don't see any ink on the roller, and you don't see any plaster of Paris in the tray. And there's a very good reason for that. We're volunteers, and it takes 3 hours to clean it up, so we don't make the mess. You have to imagine how it works. But it's a very sophisticated printer. Right now we're printing it in what we call column mode, where it comes down one particular column, printing row by row by row by row by row. You finally get to the last row and there's no more space. Now, a little lever gets tripped saying we've hit the end of the last row. But the other lever that says we're in the last column doesn't get triggered. We just get one trigger. So it says, okay, we're in the last row, but there's other columns to do yet. So it moves the entire thing over one column and drags the tray all the way back out, and we continue printing now in the second column. And it takes 8 seconds to do that, the time from having stamped an answer and moving the tray before we're ready to stamp the next answer. We're already up where it needs to be. Now this continues on until there's no more columns left. When you get to the last row, in the last column, 2 AND gates, 2 mechanical AND gates come together saying, end of page. Now, Babbage had end of page way before Microsoft did. And what happens when you get to end of page is a weight drops, which pulls on this cap gut behind me, comes up over here, comes over to there, and releases the clutch to the handle so the operator can't crank it anymore. And all of a sudden he's free with it. Oh, okay, it's done. So then he comes over and changes the tray. Takes the tray out, okay, dumps it out, lets it dry, floods it with liquid metal like lead, trims it up, and put it into a printing press and print directly from the lead plate. No human intervention. Very clever design. And when you consider that it's got 8,000 parts and we only had to make 12 minor modifications, that's not too bad, folks. 99.99% accurate to what Babbage designed. Okay. At this point, I'm going to open it up to questions. Well, no, one more thing to tell you. One more thing. Babbage had a life. He didn't just do this. And in fact, he had a wife. In 1814, he got married to Georgiana Whitmore. And 13 years later, in 1827, she's giving birth to their 8th child. He had one child every 20 months. She dies in childbirth, the child dies with her. One of his sons dies that year. His father dies that year. So 1827 was a very tragic year. And when he finally died in 1871, only 3 of his 3 sons remained. The other 5 had predeceased him. He was an inventor. He invented something you all know, the cowcatcher on the front of trains. Okay. This mechanical switch to switch the track so that the conductor doesn't have to jump out of the caboose and do it by hand. Pontoons to walk on water. He invented the automoscope, okay, but he didn't patent it. He didn't believe in patents. So someone later on invented the same scope and got credit for it. And he got a poem one time from Alfred Lord Tennyson that had an interesting line. It went like this: every moment dies a man, every moment a man is born. So he had the chutzpah to write back to Tennyson and say, sir, if that is true, our population would be stagnant. So the next time you publish your poem, I recommend the following minor modification. Every moment dies a man, every moment 1 1/16 are born. And he puts a footnote in saying 1/16 is only an approximation for the following decimal fraction. Wasn't a poem, a poet. Now I'll take your questions.
What is the machine's mean time between failure?
Months.
Months.
I mean, there are some minor jams. I wouldn't call that a failure. As far as calculating a wrong answer, that hasn't happened.